Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So, Graham, here we are in the UK at very, very early on a Monday morning, just to talk to a guest who's on the other side of the world who's just finished his Monday.
Yeah, I mean, it's time for his nosh. I mean, it's about getting on 6:45, and his stomach will be rumbling. But before he goes to his dinner, Kristian Livolsi is going to join us as our guest today on the Next 100 Days podcast. Kristian, welcome.
Oh, hi, welcome. I was waiting for something.
Yeah, you were
else
well.
to come
I well and truly cocked that up, but we'll leave it in. Kevin's usually the editing guy, and he'll leave all my mistakes in there. So, Kristian, welcome.
No, thank you very much, Graham.
It is getting on in Australia, but you've got a terrific reputation over there as a sort of a business. Almost like somebody said you were like a 360 business sort of guru. I mean, you kind of get it, and people know that you get it. So one of the reasons we really wanted you on the podcast is for you to share some of those sort of growth secrets that you've developed.
Sure. I mean, look, I don't know. Look, I'm speechless, and rarely am I speechless. I've never had that level of credit for something that I shouldn't have any credit for. Yes, I've been involved in business a long time. I'm about to start my 80th venture. I failed more than I had succeeded early on in my career. Yeah. Hence, at 45, I have a lot of grey and no hairs at all whatsoever. But look, business is a journey, and that's probably how I sum it up. And a lot of the time, your attitude truly defines the outcome, right? You both of you are well-established business people in your own right and advisors. So, I don't have to talk school to you at that level, but I think ultimately, growth is one of those things that very few people can do.
Yeah.
And you hear all these new gurus, who hire a helicopter, hire a yacht, hire a fancy house, take a couple of good video screenshots, and claim to know everything about business and how to grow. And yet the first thing they teach you, because they've copied the course off someone else, is a funnel. And you're like, are you kidding me? That's not growth. That's just spending a shitload of money to bring in more leads. And if you don't have your foundations right, the whole thing will come crashing down. And I think this is where we're failing young people. And by young people, I don't just mean, an 18, 19, 20-year-old who wants to start a business. I mean young people in their 40s who have spent their careers working, have got some brilliant ideas that they have acquired along the journey and want to go out on their own, but don't know how. And, I think that there's it's an unregulated industry, or at least an unregulated service. And I think that, some form of regulation, not so much certification, because anyone can start an organization that certifies people. But, my biggest thing, Graham, is I have a real big beef with, the fake entrepreneurs and the fake business advisors and the business coaches out there who've never owned a business and want to go out and preach business growth.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's the area that I struggle with the most. And so I think the reason why I've developed this reputation is that I am the real deal. I have lost my own money. I've never lost anyone else's money. Yeah. Even when I failed completely, I lost my own money and went and took out loans to pay a whole bunch of people back. And despite the advice, which was just declare bankrupt, keep your money overseas, move on with your life and keep going. And I'm just like, no, mate, your integrity. If you don't have your word, you got nothing in life. And I've been caught out a couple of times in my life to saying the wrong thing, and I've worn it and copped it, and you move on and you become stronger. And I think
Kristian,
that,
we've only known each other for about 10 minutes, but I all of a sudden, I don't know what about you, Kevin, but Kristian saying the wrong thing at the right time. I mean, I just don't get it. I mean, you don't seem
Not
to be a
something
person
you'd
with
ever do, Graham, is it? Say the wrong
No,
thing.
I mean, I get by without doing all that kind of nonsense, but you obviously do. I don't know. It might be the Australian in you. I don't know. Is that the thing?
No, look, we all have the slip of the tongue every now and then.
Yeah, we certainly do.
And unfortunately for me, I've worn the full brunt of page one of the main rag. And that was some 4 or 5 years ago now, and it was a very valuable lesson. Keep the embellishments to yourself, but I think what a lot of people fail to see is it's a tough slog being an entrepreneur and a business owner. And sometimes when we're feeling a little underwhelmed and we're feeling a little bit down, we all try and prop ourselves up, and you make that mistake in front of 500-600 people, and 2 years later, a journalist decides that that's what they're going to hook you on. But that's life, right? And the difference is I could have been a shithead about it, but you learn from it, right? And reputationally, it caused some real damage. I merely stated that I played professional sport for my country, and it was taken completely out of context. But nonetheless, when you're a person that people listen to, you got to be mindful of that. But ultimately, you move. As I said, you move on. And for me, that was a very clear tipping point in my life. And that's the reason why I wanted to touch on it, because I want to rehash the past. I was at the time the entrepreneur in resident of a Sandstone University. Now, that was the inaugural entrepreneur in resident, and the university has never replaced me. Now, we don't know why, but I resigned from my position with 1 month left on the term, having raised $189 million for 66 startups in less than 11 months. Wow. So you can now start to see how the story of why a journalist, the head business editor, would perhaps like to have a crack at me. I was also adjunct professor of commercialization, entrepreneurship, and innovation. I was not your perfect academic mold, and I'm far from it. I was the complete opposite. And I think for me, that's what we brought to the university, this new edge. And I have a real issue with universities around the world who, demand a professor to have a doctorate to teach, particularly at a master's level and above. And I really struggle with that concept, because I can understand if you in medicine or in fields of engineering, but in business, the experience comes from being a practitioner. And
the doctorates from actually go out there, do it yourself, and prove that it works, because it's not academic theory.
It's correct, but there is a balance. Okay, so I never went to university until mid-year, and I've got a whole bunch of awards back there. I mean, that's I got told I was stupid my whole life. I got beaten. I grew up in a very challenging household where I could never meet expectations, and so I had to really fight for validation in my life. And I was told I was stupid, and my grades subsequently reflected stupid. And so I excelled at sport. But in 2016 or 2015, I decided, hang on a minute, I've had some really big life experiences. And in 2010, I actually I had a $30 million company or group of companies, and it all crashed and burnt during the GFC. I'd overcapitalized in one. I was arrogant. I thought I could do everything, the typical entrepreneur story. And overnight, within a year, I was out. I was couch surfing, no more couple of $1 million houses, no more 4 or 5 cars in the garage. Life was gone. And it was 3 years that I spent finding who I was, really digging deep. I got involved in a energy startup. We scaled the crap out of that within 3 years. Then I started my own energy companies and remade my money. But life was never the same, because I had to carry this burden. And, I have a saying that I made the mistakes so my clients don't have to make them. And that's the doctorate, Kevin. That's the real doctorate, right? Now you don't have to go and make those mistakes, but if you have learnt from others who have made them, then you can empower. It's like resilience, right? Resilience is a skill. Okay, it's something you acquire over time, but you don't actually have to physically and mentally go through it if you learn the coping mechanisms from others. So I went back to uni, and I ended up with not a mirror effect. That's golden keys. I had a GPA of, I think, 6.3 something, or 6.3. And I was blown away. I loved it. And do you know why? Because I'd already done my MBA, in the sense that I've lived life. And, now I have the privilege of going out and talk. I get asked to go back to a lot of universities and teach and educate. And I love that. I really enjoy it. And that was the greatest challenge that I had at the university. And I didn't fit the mold. So, I did annoy a lot of people because I didn't. But, subsequently, I was there to do my job. And my job was to help those startups.
One of the people that I followed for years, and I'm sure you'll know of him, Dan Kennedy, he talks about renegade millionaires. And are you a renegade?
I don't know if I'm a renegade. I'm certainly a true believer. But Dan Kennedy is one of the world's best copywriters. I mean,
sure.
If you're using Chat GPT and you punch in right like Dan Kennedy, you should see the stuff that comes out. But
that's a great idea. I've not tried that yet, but I will.
Oh, you should. I've got a whole team. I've got 4 people in our outsourcing company who have been working on that since November. Wow. And some of the stuff that you can spin out is absolutely insane. I don't know where copyright infringement is going to go here over time, but it's certainly changing the dynamic of where we're going to end up in the future. And testimony to the guys that worked on that project and now have Microsoft funding. I mean, that's going to be a game changer. Yeah. So, and I know that Google, I think, are going to invest in Sonic Chat. Mm. Yeah, Kevin, but I mean, how many game changers have you guys witnessed over your years too? Combined experience. I mean, this is not new. AI is new, but
I mean, Kevin and I both escaped corporate, and we worked for big corporates, and then we basically. I mean, I was the internal entrepreneur, and whatever I did, I managed to upset everybody around me usually. But in the meantime, they were making a lot of money, and they still are on some of the things that I developed. But the truth of it is that it was a bit like a couple of episodes ago. We had a man who, in his own body, he didn't feel right, and so there's a story to it. But basically, he sort of felt better as a woman. Now, I'm not in that sort of category, but it was a bit an entrepreneur. I felt better as an entrepreneur or somebody who's owning a business or businesses, and effectively I feel a lot better. I feel much more in control, and frankly the only person that I argue with is the guy in the mirror. And and I think that's there is a big difference there. And and I have made mistakes, and people who've worked with me have made mistakes on my behalf, but it's painful. Probably not quite the same as you, but I suspect if I spoke more in public, then they'd have me in irons somewhere, I suppose. But that's about you, Kevin. What about you? I mean, you must have made a load of mistakes.
Oh, shed load, convinced. But is that necessarily right, Graham? Looking at the only guy you have the argument with is the guy in the mirror.
Well, sometimes I have an argument with you, but beyond that, and it's usually me.
I think I'd quite like to have somebody like Kristian to have an argument with.
I think I'd lose every time.
Sure. Yeah, you'd probably lose every time, Graham, and you'd get some great words of wisdom coming back.
Well, that's true. That is true.
I think, gentlemen, it's the other way around.
No, the thing about it is that you read about failure, and we had the fail coach on about a year or two ago, Kevin, and whose name escapes me for the moment, but we will we'll put it in the show notes. But the beauty of that was that he'd had massive failure, but he turned it around. And I have to say that in your case, you've had huge success along with a few setbacks, but you've then written back your income. You've just got it in you, haven't you, Kristian? You've just got that know-how to, and behind you can just about see that word mindset. That's the thing that you've got, isn't it? That's the key thing.
Oh, look, I would, I can say whatever I want to say, but if you spoke to my customers, and I'm just going to paraphrase our client list, and I've been very fortunate that I've hit over 1,000 clients, and that's in addition to me running my own companies at the same time in parallel. They would say that one, I care more than anybody else. And that's because I've been in their shoes, right? But the other thing they would say is that I'm the ultimate cheerleader.
Yeah.
So, and, we talk about cheerleading, but cheerleading is not the rah-rah that you see. It's what happens in the background, right? Really getting people, lifting them up, not from a motivational perspective or an inspirational perspective, but by telling them the truth when they need to hear it. And that is a mindset. So for me, I genuinely believe, because I've lived it, that every skill can be taught, right? Now, I could be taught to be a surgeon. Would I be any good at it? And would you trust me? I wouldn't trust myself, right? But what I'm trying to say is, you're taught to be a surgeon. You're not born a surgeon.
No.
So, the reality of it is anybody can be taught a skill, but your mindset and your attitude, totally different thing.
To build on your point though, if I was to be a surgeon, it's a bit like copy. Maybe 50% is about emotion, 30 about logic, and then maybe fear, the other 20%. When it comes to being a surgeon, isn't it about the same sort of idea that there's a mindset thing there, that stay calm, and possibly you might not necessarily become the best surgeon or airline pilot for that matter, if you've kind of got that almost reactionary type gene in you that enables you to, on the one side care, but on the other side maybe, react.
So absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. The attitude and the mindset can't actually be, everyone can develop a growth mindset, right? Sure. And everybody has fixed mindsets. So you can't just be in a growth mindset state the whole time.
Yeah.
But your attitude, right? And your attitude is what governs your decisions. Okay. So, how many times have you met someone that has an absolute terrible attitude? It doesn't matter what you do, you cannot help that person. Right? Now, attitudes are like your values. More often than not, they are so deep, they are almost impossible to change. Now, I don't believe in impossible. I'm not one of those people. I believe, as Audrey Hepburn said, the word itself means possible. So the reality of it is I'm a true believer. That's where I go back to, not a renegade, that anything is possible if you have the right mindset.
Yeah.
Okay. And therefore you must also have the right attitude, because both are different. Right. Now, if I don't think that, then how on earth am I going to help someone else? I'd be a hypocrite. And this is, so with a surgeon, I have a lot of friends that are surgeons. I'm a privileged white male, right, living in this world. So I'm truly blessed, and I have a lot of friends, and I went to a truly privileged boys' college. A lot of my friends are surgeons.
Yeah.
They're geniuses, right? And a lot of them will even say to me today, as Christians, it's quite funny how you never thought that you were smart, yet we all wondered why. Because you had the same, I said, mate, there's no way I wanted to be a doctor or a surgeon. I couldn't do what you do because I don't love it, right? Like, I love what I do, and I'm sure both of you do. I mean, I get up in the morning, and for a very large man, I have a huge spring in my step. I get up and I'm motivated. I don't need an alarm clock. I am up at 4:56 every single morning. It's like, give or take a couple of minutes. Sometimes I'm up a little bit earlier, but that's it. Like, it doesn't matter what time I go to bed, and it doesn't matter. I don't know how this bloody works, but it doesn't matter what country I'm in, right? I still get up at the same time, and it's the most bizarre thing. And I think what it is subconsciously, I just cannot wait to do my job. And it didn't matter when I worked for someone, even though I've only worked for someone twice in my life, I still performed like it was my company.
Yeah.
I treated it like it was mine. And that's an attitude. That's why when people say to me, it's great, you're the owner, that's why. I'm like, talking shit, man. Right? You either want it or you don't want it.
Yeah.
Right? You either decide to win or you decide to lose. Right? There's this shit in school that they're teaching about participation. Don't give me participation. Don't give me a certificate for participating and coming last. right? What are we teaching people, right? You know, I do believe in rewarding participation, but it's not as equal as coming first, second, or third.
No.
And let me tell you, coming third is fine, right? I mean, you win a bronze medal at an Olympic Games,
It's good.
one of the best 3 people in the world.
Yep.
Don't be disappointed, but don't tell me you didn't want to come first, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's there's hunger there, right? That's what makes these athletes so unique. Business is the same.
Mm.
I wonder if you lined up some of the top business guys in the world and said, "Hey, you know, how do you feel about Elon Musk making more money than you? You think these guys don't have some pissing contests going on all the time? Of course they do, right? Even though they may not say it, because society doesn't want us to have these conversations. You know, people say, Kristian, you have an ego. Of course I have an ego, right? Like you have an ego, just that you don't actually verbalize it because you're smarter than me. You realize the world's going to hate on you, whereas I kind of go, I don't really care. But at the same time, I'm also incredibly humble. I don't look at what I've done as monumental achievements. You know, I'm not sitting on $1 billion of cash in a bank account. I don't measure success by the amount of money I have. I measure success by what people say about me, right? You know, and I think that that's the difference, because I go to work because I love it, and it's still work. Don't people say, oh, you know, when you love something, it's not work? Oh, bullshit, it's work, right?
So can you actually do anything to get that sort of spirit into somebody else? So when you're coaching or when you're sharing your, if you like, business growth secrets, etc., or your attitudes and so forth, your the strengths that would make you that type of person, what can you do that? Can you actually take somebody who's, shall we say, bang average to a little bit good in a business and make them great?
Okay, so one of our values is good to great. I've ripped off Jim Collins's entire book, and I love Jim Collins's work. I think it's, anyone who's listening, if you haven't read Good to Great or any of Jim Collins's work, then, you know, finish listening to this podcast and then go buy the book. Yeah. And obviously don't start at Good to Great. Start at, you know, Entrepreneurship 2.0, which was written by Jim Collins and Bill Lazare. It was actually before it was called Beyond Entrepreneurship. And then when Bill Lazare passed away, Jim decided to write a new version about all the things that they had learnt over the 20 years. And both of them were Stanford graduate professors. And you know, Jim Collins's work to me is unbelievable. I'm sure you're both familiar with it. But what I realized when I sat down with my team a couple of years ago and I said, let's reassess our values. And they said, Kristian, one of our values is good to great. You truly take people from good to great. Now, I am blessed. Apart from being a white, privileged male, I am blessed, right? I get to pick and choose who I want to work with these days, you know, and I am the dude that walks around in a $20 t-shirt with I'm wearing flip-flops at the moment, right? That's my life. You know, I say to my clients, you're not paying me for my appearance. You're paying me for my thinking, for how I develop strategy, for how I get you from A to B. And the truth is they pay me because I take them from good to great. So to answer your question, anybody who's good can be taken to great. Yeah. Now, someone who's terrible can be taken to good. Very few, though, make that further transition. Right. Keep in mind, there is a lot of good people in the world, but there is a lot more average and a lot more bad. And there is very few people that get to great. Okay. And Jim says it in his work. You know, if I ever had the privilege of meeting any one person, it would be Jim Collins, just to have a conversation around data, right? What they've been able to collect. But simply put, Graham, yes, I think that you can always take someone who's good to great because of their attitude.
Okay, so how do you do that then? You take somebody walks into your life and they're your client, and you can see they're good. You can see they've got some of the things that you need to get them to great. What are those things, and how do you dig it out of them?
All right. So the first thing is, and again, I'm going to rip off some of Jim Collins's work. Jim talks about first who, then what. Okay. So the concept around, always look to hire the right people. He talks about the bus. So as an individual, I handpick who I work with, right? I look at their attitude first. I then look for value alignment. And I'm not talking about just some bullshit right fit. People talk about, when you get on strategy calls, right? Ladies and gentlemen, strategy calls are sales calls. Yeah. Okay. People are trying to sell you something. And, people talk about the right fit, right? And it's not just a kiss on the forehead. A right fit is truly, do your values align with mine? I spend my team on a triage call, the initial discovery call, will actually ask people, what are your values? And people can't answer them. They generally don't make it to the next step. Yeah. Because I can't work with someone who I don't truly understand what's below the iceberg. So the first step is truly understand your values. I call it the core. And the core is essentially your purpose. Yeah? Why are you alive? What are you doing this for? And remember, your purpose isn't something you choose. Okay? Your purpose is it's already defined by the time you're in your teens. So you've got to uncover that. And so many people spend their whole life lost, right? We see all this depression and all this mental health challenges. I bet you when you sit down and you actually say to these people, I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of clients in the allied health space, and I have four plus four in the psychology space. And I talk about this with the psychologists, and they're like, Kristian, we just love your attitude to it. You just go in and you literally go jab, jab, right hook, as Gary Vee would say. And the whole philosophy around that is to make it stick. So, for me, it's the core. So then there's, we talk about purpose and values, and then we talk about core competencies. And this is where I make my final assessment. So once I understand that your values are solid and they align with mine, I tend to go, okay, let's really understand your value, your purpose. And we work on, not everyone knows this, but I help people uncover that. Then we go, okay, now let's assess your core competencies. What is it that you're really good at that other people cannot replicate? And when I find that there are people, and a lot of people have at least one thing that they're really good at that other people would find hard to replicate. Now, when I say this, it is a little loose because there are 7 billion people in this world, okay? So most core competencies can be replicated, as they can be in a company. But the likelihood of someone within, 1,000 kilometers of you, right, is starting to narrow down and slim out, okay? So that's how we assess whether or not, or that's how I assess whether or not I want to work with someone, but more importantly, on whether that company can actually, firstly, are they good or can they be good in the first place? Yeah. And that core really, Graham, defines people and their organizations for that matter.
Interesting. If you had to sort of put on the words of three fingers, your core, I'm trying to the essence of what a Kristian is. What words would you use? What are the words that kind of defined you? Your not so much the core competencies, but your sort of attitudes and beliefs, if you like, when you were in your mid-teens. Because I remember back then, I got my mum to get me The Economist. Mm-hmm. I loved The Economist as much as anything because of the way in which they wrote. And I adapted my writing style because, and I've always been interested in copy. I've always been interested in the sales process. And that started about then, plus politics and everything else like that. It's taken me about, 40 odd years just to figure out that the two left of centre for me, but that's beside the point. I mean, but they're very, very smart as individuals. What is it with you? I mean, in your teens or thereabouts, what did you find out about you?
Look, in my teens, life was, as I said, quite challenging. My house was quite dysfunctional, very dysfunctional. Very abusive. It wasn't, on the surface it looked fine, and beneath the school trousers there were bruises everywhere, and they weren't just handprints, they were rubber hoses. So, I was conditioned, but I think that I always pushed through, and that's what built my resilience. So for me,
Right.
I didn't really flourish until I left home. And as soon as I graduated year 12, I decided to go and play rugby around the world and study hotel management. So, I got to be wild, athletic, travel the world. And I think that broadened my way of thinking, but money was never my driver. Right. So, but it wasn't until I worked at Claridge's in Mayfair, and I had one of the rooms that I went to. I was a Royal Footman, and I had to take up some room service because the room service team was full, and it was one of the suites. In fact, I think it was the Princess Suite, and the gentleman in the room had the BRW in front of them, and I was like, okay, I was 18 years old. And I actually asked, I had a conversation. So what's the BRW? It's a Business Review Weekly. And I was like, right, but is that an English publication? No, it's a global publication at the time. And, I thought, okay, cool. And I said, why do you read it? And he goes, well, I'm in business. I was like, okay, you're in business. And then I looked around the room, and I'll never forget, he had pre-revolutionary Cuban cigars. He wore a Breitling watch. We got talking, and he had a couple of Mont Blanc pens, and that was the moment that I went, I need to start looking at this stuff. And I started to pay attention to all the other clients, and the people that had wealth had these things. They had Rolexes. I mean, these things were all materialistic.
Yeah.
But to me, I didn't care about the materialism of it. I cared about the fact, how did you get it? And so I started speaking to these people, and I started asking questions. Now, 18-year-old, and they loved it. I'm talking, I looked after some incredibly high-profile people I'm sure you're familiar with Claridge's. This is it was at the time in the 90s, just after the refurbishment, the Queen's Hotel. The first floor was reserved for the Queen, or if she wasn't going to be using it at any time, if the palaces or anything were being refurbished, then the sheikhs would take it, right? So, you got to work, you got to be part of, this group. And I learned that. And then when I got into the private equity world for 3 years, I saw this on scale. And it was like, so I bought my first Mont Blanc pen. I set myself a goal and a target, and I went and bought myself one. I'm pretty sure it is sitting still in my drawer, not in this drawer, but I have another 5 here. So I have stacks of them now. I've bloody accumulated them over the years. And guess what I'm using at the moment? A pen from a hotel that I was at the other day. So, I guess you park it, and I've collected, probably 12 watches in my lifetime, timepieces. This is all pre the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm trying to demonstrate here is for me, the tipping point was the BRW. Right? Like that was it. But it was a whole bunch of series of other things that came through at the same time that said to me, hey, you need to propel yourself. And that's where my attitude shifted. Yeah. And I started almost mimicking the people around me. So to answer your question, the first original question, now bringing it all together, how can you affect attitude? Well, Jim Rohn said that you are the sum of the 5 people that you spend most of your time with. So I always say to people, select the people you want to hang out with. And this is one of the main reasons why now I'm truly blessed, because people want to hang out with me. Now I preserve that, and I'm very protective. You won't see me on a lot of people's podcasts, but you guys had Holly, and Holly's one of my clients. She's my youngest client, right?
Yeah,
and
we
she
love
said to
Holly.
me, she goes, yeah, and Holly is one of the most beautiful human beings in the world.
Yeah,
and I have helped that girl transition. She's getting married in March, and she's also got a baby girl on the way. So, So, but the thing is, she said to me, she goes, I think these guys are going to reach out to you. I'm like, sure. I mean, I had the luxury of interviewing Dr. John DeMartini on my podcast last 2 weeks ago from the world, from his residency. And, he said to me, he goes, why do you do the podcasting? Like, it's not like, you don't need to do it. I said, I just love talking to people like on a global scale. And this, when I read both of your bios and saw the amount of effort you guys put into this, I was like, I just have to meet these guys. And when Holly said it, she said to me, she goes, well, I'm going to do this, right? And lucky Tracy was able to find a time, because I've been traveling like crazy, and I'm back overseas again next week. But to pull that together, you are the sum of the 5 people you hang out with, and you've got to choose your people really, really well. And for me, I was very lucky. I went to a privileged school, so I was able to surround myself with the right people who had the right education. Don't get me wrong, even privileged schools have bad kids who made bad choices. Sure. I was a good kid who made bad choices, right?
Forgive me for interrupting you there a second, because you've mentioned the colour of your skin and privilege more than once, and it irritates me. Not that you're saying it, but it irritates me that we have to think that way. It's
the truth, though. Like, I mean, look, 85% of my clients are women, right? And that's another reason why they come to me, because they know that I get it. Like women have to endure this gigantic mental load, right? Yeah. And the reality of it is, I have a daughter and a son. And, to me, I don't care about the color of someone's skin. No, I don't care about your gender. But unfortunately, you are right. Yeah. We do. I'm not saying it because I want to win brownie points with listeners. I genuinely value the fact that I am white and that I am privileged. Do you know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that I had a great life. That's the point I'm also trying to convey.
But there's something about privilege. There's something about what you do and what you've done to the world, and how you're working with Holly and other people that we've known. The point is that it doesn't matter where you come from or what color of skin or what age you are or what. If you've got the right sort of attitudes, and for me, somehow the word privilege just says you've got it by chance almost. And there might be truth in that, but the thing about it is that you can, with your skill set, transform somebody into the very best version of themselves, whatever skin color. And that's the bit that irritates. I think look. Anyway, sorry. I've told you I could be in jail.
No. I want to compliment you on what you just said. My objective, and I think everyone's objective, it doesn't matter what you do as a profession, you should always aspire to bring the very best out of someone.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think, and I almost get really emotional when I say that, because to me, that is why I'm alive. I mean, it's why my strat statement is live with purpose. Yeah. For me, it's to help people live their purpose, so they can be the very best version of themselves. And, we don't get into consulting. I don't think anyone who truly gets into consulting does it purely to make money. I mean, you might start off there, but when you truly, you get gray hair like us, you start to go, you know what? I do this because I love it and I want to help people, and again, people go, oh yeah, well, of course you say that now. I'm like, hey, please. And I guess this is where I say that I have ego. Because I get to choose who I want to work with, I can completely alienate those people because my values and theirs don't align. Yeah. But at the same time, I understand who I am because I have to know who I am so I can affect change.
Yeah.
And I also appreciate that some people, they may not see me that way. I mean, I don't know the last time I was called fat, but I'm gigantic. Right? Like, I'm a big monstrosity of a human being. I actually had to check up today how much Eddie Hall weighed. You guys are familiar with Eddie Hall, the world's strongman. He's from the UK.
Oh, right. I don't know him, but I can imagine he's.
And I was thinking to myself, how much and he's called the Beast. And I sat there and I Googled. I love Google, by the way. I love searching. I mean, my son uses Siri. Right? I still type and I'm still trying to get my head around using voice. But I think, and that's another way the world is changing. But I was like, he must be, and he's 6'2.5". I'm 6'3". He's a lot more muscle. I'm a lot more fat, but we weigh the same at his peak. And I thought to myself, wow, I can still fit in a seat. He can't. And I was like, right, that's the muscle.
Right.
So anyway, but no, look, I think the point I'm trying to make there is we are all different.
Yeah.
Right? We're all different. And I think this is your point too. We all have different backgrounds, and gender and the color of our skin shouldn't really matter.
No.
But, unfortunately it does. And it still does. Do I believe in quotas, right, on boards? No, I don't. I think you hire the best people for the job, whether they're male or female. But have women had a very, very hard ride? Yes, they have.
I think they're getting a harder one right now because of some of this, shall we say, correctness. But if there's nothing else that we can do to affect the benefit, affect the lot of women, it's to do something about the changes that are happening to them in sports and various other things. It's absolutely totally wrong. But I don't want to make this too much of it because Kevin gets upset with me.
No. Let's move on from that.
No, but seriously though, and I wanted to correct something I said earlier because I forgot the name of Mia Metlevsky, and he is the fail coach, and he was brilliant. And if you ever want to sort of tune into a different podcast, Mia was really good. Actually, I almost had it is in tears. His story was so palpably good. But the difference is here, you've got this huge amount of success. You're a big, ebullient, very, very talented individual, and still young. I mean, Kevin, he looks younger than me, but he's about the same age, give or take. And the thing about it is, you've still got so much more to do. What is it that you want to be able to achieve and rock the world with in the next few years before, you catch up to Kevin and I?
Look, it's an interesting question because I had a lot of people don't know this, so I'm probably not going to talk about it. But I've had a bit of a life impacting diagnosis recently, so I really don't know my end. Well, like everybody, I still don't know my end date, but I'm sure as hell much closer potentially than most people. But my focus hasn't changed. And we talk about attitude. I tripled the amount of revenue I made in the last 45 days since the diagnosis. And so think about it, was Christmas. My whole team looked at me and were like, who are you? Most people get the diagnosis like you did and they stop work. You 5x, 10x your philosophy. And I went, see, here's the difference, ladies and gentlemen. Me wants to get shit done. I don't sit and wallow about what can be. I've got specialists, and I've had multiple procedures in hospital, and even the specialist says to me, "You're a freak." I said, "Well, you've told me my diagnosis is 1 in 5 million. I'm officially special." I said, "So I'm going to work on everything I can to affect the change that I need to." Yeah. So where do I want to be? Nothing's changed. I still want to become a professor or a fellow at Stanford or Harvard. Yeah. That's it. I have on the table multiple PhD scholarships. I need to find the time to be able to do it. So I've rewritten the handbook in my business 7 or 8 months ago to move from a model of one to many. Yeah. So I launched a mastermind and it's almost full. But I love making money because money affords us the ability to do things that we need to do. And, for me, the reason like I said to my team, the reason why I went out and secured all this work and also delivered it while everybody else was having holidays, right, and was having fun doing all this meaningful shit, right, I still spent time with my family. I have a very close family. My wife and I are tied at the hip. I travel with my family because I make enough money that I can put my family on an airplane, hire a 2-bedroom hotel suite, right, and still take them on the journey with me. So they just recently came to Melbourne with me. I was there for 2 days. I have an office in Melbourne, in Sydney. We're about to open up in Vancouver, right? We've got one in Dublin. So the reality of it is, yes, I have been successful, but it's because I have a mindset around success and nothing else gets in the way. But as I said to you, Graham, for me, my dream is to, be a professor at Stanford or Harvard. And people always ask me, and probably your next question is, why Stanford or Harvard? They are the very best business schools in the world.
Mm.
And if I do that, it means I am one of the absolute best people, because in my opinion, a teacher should be better than its pupils. And
or at least a chapter ahead.
Well, yeah, at least a chapter ahead.
Yeah.
That's right. I love that. I hadn't thought of that. But to me, I would love, now that doesn't mean it has to be a full-time gig, but the ability, the quality of candidates that do the master's programs at those schools are phenomenal. And I believe that if I'm good enough to be there, it means I can affect something constructive in them, and they're going to be the movers and shakers of the future.
Yeah, so you know what's going to happen, though? You'll get the gig. And because you'll be so successful, 80% of the class that you're teaching will be off before they finish. Because isn't that the case with some of these guys? They get to Stanford and Harvard and they never complete. They'll go off and start.
It's true.
Facebook or something, I don't know, or whatever.
Look, I think the part that I'm excited about is this. It's just working with really clever people. Like, you're the sum of the 5 people that you spend most of your time with.
Yeah.
And, in fairness, when I went to work as the entrepreneur in resident at the university, I had such severe imposter syndrome, right? Like, this is a brand new role, Sandstone University, and they've appointed this guy who's failed. And sure, I'd succeeded a lot. But when I was in a room with some of these people, they were mind-blowingly smart. I'm talking, I said I was on the business school advisory board, and I would sit in the room with other business people, like some incredibly smart people. And I felt so inferior. But, within 3 meetings, a lot of these guys were asking me if I was interested in sitting on other boards. And a lot of the professors who were, unbelievable researchers would start to, because I would say to them, look, can you share some research with me? Because I'd love to read it. And I'm not a huge reader. I'm dyslexic, medically diagnosed dyslexic and ADHD. But I have overcome those things over time by discipline application. Yeah. And Jim Collins talks about this, discipline people, discipline thought, discipline action, and again, so look, I could sit here and talk to you guys about this stuff all day because I'm passionate about it.
That comes across in spades. I mean, what's your impression of this chap that we've got from Australia, Kevin?
It is exactly that word. It's passion.
Yeah.
And there are so many things that we've talked about this morning that we've talked about bits of them in other podcasts. And what I love about this conversation, Kristian, is how those have all been brought together.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, the beauty of the podcast is that we meet really, really passionate, really capable people. Holly's one of them. And basically you get this sort of, it's almost like an MBA every week. Now, back in my day, I did one. But it was one of the most enjoyable periods of my time, because every single time I went to the university, I was doing something, I was getting taught something theoretically that I'd just done, whether it was firing somebody, hiring somebody, doing something to do with marketing. And then, so it was completely in sync with what I was doing, maybe apart from the accountancy bit, which, I needed Kevin with me at the time.
I'm trying to teach Graham that bit.
No.
I love numbers.
But yeah. Well, I love some numbers, but I have to say, you have been, if we get the chance, we'll definitely have you back, because I think there's so much more that we can get into. But for now, Kristian Livolsi, you've been an absolutely fantastic guest on the Next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here with you guys.
So, Graham, mindset, purpose, values, and application.
What a wonderful inspiration Kristian Livolsi is. He shared something with us at the end there, which didn't half make me pause, but it's just a bundle of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see that he's got a success mindset. I wonder just how much of that success mindset started off in him playing professional sport, playing rugby to a high standard, wanting to win. And you look at those sorts of sports in Australia, and they just have a winning mindset in them.
Oh yeah, they do. But for me, the interesting sort of pivot was when he was working at Claridge's, and I think that was just being aware of his surroundings, but having the curiosity and the front. I don't know what the right word is, but he actually then inquired of these people who were very willing to share, of how did they get to where they are now, and what a way of learning. And so it's almost like he went to the very best university for him, which was working at Claridge's, on the upper floors. So I have to say he's been one of them. It says it on his own website, which is really interesting. And transformational and inspiring leader, strategic, performance focused. He has experience of entrepreneurship, innovation, and energetic leadership. There ain't a word of that that's a lie.
Too right.
We've been very privileged today to have Kristian Livolsi. I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.